Okay. All right. So, all right. So let's see. Do you know how I remove this top bar from here from my screen? Is that? This is crazy. I've had this problem. I don't know how to get rid of this top bar.
Just eliminate, yeah.
Okay. So where were we last time? Remember what happened last time was that Arjuna and Arjuna is in a war with his cousins, and he is completely confused. But initially, basically, the confusion starts in a way where he tells Krishna, his friend, who is riding his chariot, he basically tells him that, hey, I would like to see who all am I fighting. Can you just take me to the middle of the battlefield? And Krishna, being Krishna, um, he he plays a little bit of a mischief, I think, but deliberately, to bring some discussion on at least some confusion or dilemma in Arjuna's mind. So what he does is he takes the chariot right in front of his grandpa and his teacher. They both are very beloved to Arjuna, and that sets about this whole depression in Arjuna. So he basically says, Krishna, how the heck am I going to kill my grandpa? I have played in his arms, and how am I going to kill my teacher? I love him. And now he had other people that Krishna could have taken the chariot right in front of them, like Duryodhana, his cousins who he hated, or any other hundreds of people there. But he chooses to put him right in front to let this sink in Arjuna's mind that he's not fighting a regular battlefield. So this is not a first time that he has gone to battlefield. He has fought many wars. He has killed many people, but now he has to fight with his own family. And had the chariot been taken right in front of Duryodhana, the cousin who he hates, he would have probably not had any qualms at all. And he would have okay, yeah, let's go for it. So Krishna basically brings him into a state of dejection, and Arjuna basically says, oh my God, I don't think I can fight. Why do we have to fight? Why don't we just give up the arms? And what is the point in fighting this a war? All our loved ones are going to get killed, and I'm not sure if I'm going to let that sin carry on my head for rest of my life. I would rather go to the mountains and completely renunciate and just be a yogi or a sadhu or a monk. And so Krishna basically starts yelling at him, saying, this is just you're ridiculous. I mean, you came up to this point, and you are speaking something that has been mechanically put in your head. Because what happens a couple days prior to this is Duryodhana's father has tried to convince Arjuna, like, look, what is the point in fighting? It's just a kingdom. Why can't we be the king? And you go find some other place, and you guys are nice people, blah, 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 right? All of that. And so it almost to Krishna reminds him that, is this really your view, or are you just trying to posture somebody else's views? Because if it is really your view, let me tell you what is an intelligent man. What is a wise man? You want to be wise by, you're talking about peace, and you want to go to the jungle, and you want to be a monk, all of that. Well, let me explain what that means. So he goes through this whole thing about like, hey, there are two paths. One is direct knowledge, and the other is, going through different kinds of yogic activities and all of that, right? So one of them being, hey, look, I already know, like everybody is going to die eventually, and so that was the Sankhya philosophy, right? So where you're not really so worried about the current situation of human beings and all of that, right? So you're thinking at a much higher level, which is you have attained the knowledge, and we talked about the Prakriti and the Purusha, right? So you're much more closer to the Purusha, the Atman, and you're just like cool about everything, and you fight the thing, you fight the war, whatever is required, but you don't have any kind of desire to win or lose, and that is not really confusing your mind. So that is one approach, right? So the other approach is the yoga approach, where he says that, hey, look, you have to do your karma, do your duty, whatever has come to you. You are known to be such a great warrior, and not many times does a warrior gets such a great opportunity to do something good on this planet. And you're going to be helping the whole society if you fight this war. But if you give up, it is going to be a disgrace for you. It is going to be a disgrace for everybody. The bad elements in the society will continue hurting the people. So don't worry so much about all of this. So he takes Arjuna through a variety of different types of arguments. So he has, at the end of this, he has given him basically two different paths. So let me minimize this. He has given him like Sankhya, the knowledge, path of resolute wisdom is one. Irresolute has too many confusing paths, right? So that's what he tells him. Everything you see is Purusha and Prakriti, right? So everything can be broken down into the soul or the Paramatman or the God, whatever you want to call it, the consciousness. And Prakriti is everything that we see, right? Mind, body, the nature, right? And everything is a mixture of these three different elements, right? Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva. We'll cover that again later on. Everything gets recycled. Our irresoluteness and sorrows are due to our focus on dualities, right? So in his mind, he was thinking, if I win, a lot of my family members are going to get killed. And so he's already sort of has this notion in his mind that he's such a great warrior and he is definitely going to be winning this war, right? So he's already set that in his mind. That causes a bit of a problem for him. In the light of this wisdom, religious rituals to go to heaven are like a well, like a water well during a flood, right? So if somebody had this kind of a Sankhya knowledge, then he says, right? He says, look, let's think about this. Let's be wise about this. Let's not fight this war. So what Krishna says is true wisdom. If you really have true wisdom, Arjuna also says like, oh, look, if I do this, many of my generations, according to our scriptures, they are going to go to hell, and there will be a lot of chaos in the society, right? So he says, like, he talks about heaven and hell as if that is like some true wisdom in a way. So Krishna corrects and says, if you really, really, really think you have the wisdom, wise people do not worry about heaven and hell. So that is kind of like, when there's so much water, you're worried about a small well, right? So that's not what happens. And then the second path he tells him is, you're definitely not here, but you are a warrior. So you want to do the actions that is going to help you and help the society. So that causes a bit of a confusion in Arjuna's mind. And I bet there's a confusion in our mind too, right? So chapter 3 and 4, they go into this thing which is called as karma yoga. So karma yoga, we're going to talk more about that. And in English, I guess you could call it the yoga of the works, or yoga of action is what I call it. And so, by the way, we are reading the translation by Arvinda Ghosh, one of the eminent scholars in India back in the days, like around 1800s, late 1800s and early 1900s. So there are many translations available. No one translation is better than the other. Everybody is great. There is so many different opinions and so many different ways to look at this. And a lot of the times, what we see is really what is made up, what our mental makeup is, right? So we tend to see, and for me, coming to Gita really has so many different reasons, because of all the things that are going on in my world, but also the attack of technology that is happening over us, right? I don't call it attack because I myself am a tech worker. I developed the technology which is kind of taking us away from ourselves, right? So that is the point of me coming back to Gita. So Arjuna says, if thou boldest the intelligence to be greater than works, O Janardana, Janardana is Krishna's other name, why then dost thou, O Keshava is another name, appoint me to a terrible work, like killing this stuff? You're really confusing me. So then the blessed Lord said, now here, throughout this Gita, you will notice that they will never use the term direct name of the friend, Krishna, right? So they always use this term blessed Lord. Now let's talk a little bit about that, right? So I think it is key that what they are doing is Arjuna, they always call Arjuna, but they never call the other person whatever his human name was. And the point there being that really Krishna at that point, and there are so many different ways to interpret this. I have my own personal interpretation about this, where it could just have been Arjuna's sort of self-talk, right? So he had sort of like in his own internal knowledge must have really presented to him, and this is his inner dialogue. But it could very well have been his friend Krishna, who is outside of these the brothers in the civil war that is happening. So he could probably think straight than Arjuna. And when we say, like, when somebody is able to speak straight, they typically are not speaking because they don't have any motivation per se. They don't have any desire. They don't care if somebody wins or loses. So whatever is coming is really coming from deep within. And the way to think of this is, we have talked about this in many other topics in the past, like Drigdrisha Viveka, or the seer and seen type of discussions, where we talk about consciousness, right? So one that is even beyond. So there is senses, beyond senses are mind, beyond mind there is intellect, and beyond intellect there is consciousness. And because that consciousness kind of streams through all of these paths, can we talk and we can touch and we can experience this whole world. And somebody can speak directly through mind, out of desire or out of malice, out of spite or whatever, right? Then it doesn't ring as so truthful. So blessed Lord here means that it is coming from deep within. It's not just Krishna, it is something more than Krishna that is trying to talk to Arjuna at this point, right? In this world, twofold is the self-application of the soul, by which it enters into the Brahmic condition, as I before said, O sinless one, right? So here he calls him sinless, just to kind of let the guards drop down, and he can feel less of a guilt for whatever he's doing, and try to understand this in a little more purest form. There is a what is that? What is it called? There's a way to approach a criminal or somebody who has done something bad, where you can say something negative and you basically push them away, but you can give him a positive reinforcement, right? So this is kind of like that, right? So positive reinforcement. So suddenly they start thinking in a different direction. And so he says that that of the Sankhyas by the yoga of knowledge, that of the yogins by the yoga of works, right? So there is the knowledge and then there is work. These are the two distinctions that he makes. And if you think about all the different religions, right, there is or actually different philosophers, or any kind of an achievement that you would see in spiritual area, they always break down into these two paths, if you will. So if you think about Socrates or Plato or Buddha, for that matter, or Mahavira from India, they were very much about knowledge, right? So they were just saying that this is all you need to know. Life is suffering, and just do this, and that's it, right? Now, yoga of works, where there is a lot of rituals in that religion, a lot of hierarchies and all of that stuff, right? So because there are so many things that you have to go through before you get there. So one depiction of that, one of the Swamis, what he does is he says, Sankhya, or the knowledge path, is kind of like turning on a bulb in a completely dark room. That's all you need. You need just that ray of sunshine, and that's all you need to get your get the knowledge. While there are a whole bunch of religions that kind of say there are so many efforts that you have to go through. There's these different levels that you have to go through, right? So that's what Krishna is talking about, right? So there are two different paths, not by abstention from works, right? So which is what he was trying to do. Does a man enjoy actionlessness? This is really, really key. There are three states of action. Actually four, I would say. One is action, where we just do something. There is the inaction, which is not doing anything, which is laziness, right? Then there is reaction, right? So somebody pulls that action out of you. And the fourth state is the actionless state. This is what karma yoga is all about, right? Actionlessness is about, all of these three earlier things that I talked about, action, reaction, or inaction, they all come from a certain level of desire. And that desire kind of will put you into the bondage of whatever a thing that you are trying to achieve through that action, whatever your goal was. And so that goal is going to either make you happy, and once you're happy, you're going to eventually become sad because that happiness is not going to last for too long. So the point that Krishna is going to try to make is, not by abstention from works does a man enjoy actionlessness. And this actionlessness has nothing to do with not doing actions. It is more about doing actions, but without any desire for the rewards. Remember in the earlier chapter, in verse 47, this is sort of like one of the famous quotes, at least in Sanskrit, but thou hast a right to action, but only to action, right? We all have rights to action, but that's it. You cannot say that I have the right to whatever the reward was at the end of it. So never to its fruits. Let not the fruits of thy works be thy motive, right? This is what makes that action actionless. And neither let there be in thee any attachment to inactivity, right? So this is the inaction. So he basically lays out in 47 exactly what karma yoga is. And this is, most Indians will know that rhyme there. Nor by mere renunciation of works does he attain to his perfection. Okay, so this one, right? So siddhi here means, like, any act, now, it can mean a lot of things. It could mean people walking on water surface. That's not how I understand it. I understand it more in the sense that, let's say we all have certain expertises. So we have certain expertise because we have worked on it, like Gladwell, right? Malcolm Gladwell. He basically has that book, 10,000 hours. So somebody who has gone through this much of a study of a topic, he certainly has this siddhi or perfection in that area versus other things. And, so he basically says that not by mere renunciation does he attain to his perfection, right? So we all have something, is what Krishna is trying to say. We all have something. And when you just run away from things because they are going to make you more ready for, let's say, heaven or something, you're not really fulfilling the reason you are here on this planet. We all have something to give to this world, so we better stay in this world, is what he's saying. He who controlling the senses by the mind, or Arjuna, without attachment, engages with the organs of the action in yoga of action, he excels, right? Controlling the senses. So let's see here. I think I have a yeah. Okay, I think this one. Yeah. So okay, we have talked about this many times, right? So one of the neat things about Bhagavad Gita is we started at least I started the lecture series here with Vedanta, right? So Vedanta is like the highest form of Indian philosophy. And I would say it tops, and this is not, I mean, it's just mind blowing. Like I was never introduced to it when I was growing up. I only lately got introduced to it, and I was just completely amazed by what it has to say. And a lot of people, a lot of the philosophers around the globe seem to want to understand what this is, right? So what Bhagavad Gita does is it takes a lot of these Vedanta concepts, and there are so many Upanishads, right? So we talked about 108 or plus Upanishads, right? There's more than 108, but those are sort of like the core important Upanishads. So those books are very dense, and they are very good too, obviously. But what Bhagavad Gita does, it just takes everything and makes it ready for you. It just has all the information that you need, and it just brings it into a very succinct format, and that's why it is loved by everyone. But then the terminology used all over is also about God and religion and all of that. So it got appropriated by a lot of religious segments in India, and they started, in a way, abusing it. So you have the caste system, or you have races, all kinds of things that started happening that people could blame that to this book, but that is mostly because nobody really reads this book for the intended purposes, and it is the priests who take this book and pinpoint small pieces here and there and try to control the masses, right? So which is what was going on back then, and maybe now too, right? I mean, even today, Indian religion, the way Indians pray, and Hinduism is very orthodox. It's not really what Vedanta wants to say. It is definitely not what Krishna was trying to talk about in Bhagavad Gita. We still have a lot of these deities being praised and prayed and all of that stuff, right? So there's too many rituals that happen, and most of these rituals tend to be like, hey, God, here I am, I'm doing this ritual, get my son job that he wants, or get my daughter a kid, or whatever, something or the other, right? So it's all about, like, God is as if some contractor, right? You're just assigning God a task. Anyways, so we have talked about this, right? So objects in the world, there is the senses that tend to understand this object, right? Lights basically means that we can detect the object. Mind is also through the senses trying to understand the world, right? And then all of this, the light really comes from our consciousness. Had there not been consciousness in us, the mind or senses, none of these they would not exist, basically, right? So would the objects. The objects would not exist either. So let's talk about this further. Human condition, right? So our condition, we follow orders of our senses. We do not give command. We do not command our body. There's a typo there. Self itself is unknown, right? So remember, in seer and seen, we talked about, like, who is the seer and who is the seen, right? So what happens is our whole world is based around mind. We think mind is the boss, and we understand this is me and that is you. Those are the others out there. And we don't understand this concept of, like, there's somebody else, something else more than mind, that is allowing mind to understand the world, right? So self is unknown, and mind constantly gets into all kinds of dilemma, like Arjuna has. We are basically collections of perceptions, desires, and always suffer, right? So this actually, I came across this phrase in one of the writings by David Hume as well, where he says, like he goes to Greece to this temple. I'm forgetting the name of that temple, but he goes there, and there is written, there's carved up this big, in big letters, know thyself. And he is trying to muse on that, like, oh, what does that mean, know thyself? And he starts looking within, and he basically says, there's nothing, literally everything is just made up in my mind. Everything is just like, it's God knows what the self is that they are talking about, the Greek. And so we always are suffering, right? And even when we have pleasure of whatever activity that we might be doing, that pleasure doesn't last for too long. And of course, sorrows, we are not really happy about them. So know thyself. So let's break down this action a little bit in, like 3 or 4 different categories here. So our action typically, one is something that we need, right? We're hungry, so we go eat food, or we have to work, we have to earn money, and then use that to survive. That in Indian language you would call it as kriya, life's need. Then comes life's wants. So this is where now you have something like food and everything, but now you want these bigger house, I guess, or whatever, right? That is absolutely not a need, but a want. So there's a desire. And this is what the Indian scriptures would call as karma, right? And this is what gets accumulated. And, because you're doing this, you might be hurting the planet, you might be hurting yourself. You think you might be doing something good while you're doing this, because your ego might be getting boosted while you're doing something good in this world, without anybody's asking or wanting you to. That is also karma, right? So that is also causing some problems. Getting rid of the doer, right? So this notion of I am doing it, which is what Krishna is going to come to, is the karma yoga. And then finally, just being, so later on I talk about, like, there are 2 kinds of prayers that happen in Indian language, right? In Hinduism. One is you pray to God because you want something. So you want job, or you want to have kid, all that stuff, right? So those are the ritualistic stuff. That is part of the Veda, the initial part of the text that comes along in the scriptures. And there what happens is you're asking God to give you power. You're asking God to give you Shakti in Indian language, right? So that is the power to do something on this planet, right? And the God will grant your wishes. The other kind of prayer is where you are sort of like, you look at the futility of this everyday stuff, and you want to feel liberated. And about, like, people who have felt liberated, it has nothing to do with belongings or anything like that, right? So that liberation that you feel is the other path, which is also in Indian language, it would be called as mukti, which is the freedom path. The first is Shakti, the power path, and the second is mukti, right? So here you are knowing oneself is trying to decode your day-to-day actions, and you coming to a point where you kind of feel liberated from this bondage of the desires. So Krishna goes through this stuff in the 2 chapters. So there is the so-called intelligent will. Intelligent will is like, one is like, many a times we just don't know about the other side. So we tend to blindly exist in doing things, right, on this planet. And but there is a way for you to kind of like push back and say, look, wait, I want to do this. Why am I wanting to do this? And then that is where your will plays a very important role. And in Indian language, it would be called as sankalpa. Like, I am deliberately choosing not to do that, right? So now you're going in a different path. Reads the desires. Desires is also the other word for this is vasana. So the current state that most of us are in is where we have no control, right? So mind has no control over the senses. Senses are almost autonomously responding to the objects, right? One typical example one of the Swami gives is about a cigarette smoking habit, right? The cigarette smoking habit, many a times your fingers would just go get the cigarette and then just light it and put it in your mouth, right? Without even thinking. There's so many things that we do without thinking, right? While we are driving or whatever. Only when like you come very close to hitting something or whatever, do you suddenly realize, oh my God, what happened, right? So now you have moved from senses to actually the mind and the intellect and all of that stuff, right? So it takes some time for you to kind of navigate this. So right now, our typical most of the time, we are in the state of vasana. Where the senses are driving us, right? So the first thing you want to do is control the senses, right? So when you control the senses, you come closer to the mind. And here is where in the mind, what happens is you have these two paths that you can take. Here's a desire that has come about, and I want to do this. And if I want to do this, what are the repercussions, right? So there's positive way of doing it, negative way of doing it, whatever, right? So here is where you are choosing a particular path with a conscious decision, right? That is what the translation is going to call as intelligent will. Now, definitely, this is not suppression, right? So he's going to talk about that. Then you want to, once you have controlled your senses, now you're in the mind, but then you also want to control this mind. And, I forgot to show the block here, but it would be intellect, right? So here, the mind would say, okay, well, I really wish I would do this, and that's not going to hurt anybody. And it's really like, I want to do it, right? So this is where the brain has to be stepped in, right? And he is going to say, or she is, intellect is going to say, well, wait a second. Why do you want to do this? Is this really what you need? Blah, 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 right? This is again part of that intelligent will. And so karma yoga becomes dhyana yoga. This is where you really need that mindfulness for doing, the first thing and also the second thing, concentration, contemplation, right? And then what happens is even that intelligence, if you think that you are smart enough to control your mind and senses, it can lead to egoism. And that ego itself, it can lead to so many other problems, like anger and so many other issues. It's just crazy amount of issues, right? So this is where the fourth path that Krishna covers eventually. So here, this is a good summary of what is coming in the next 18 chapters, right? Rest of the thing. So karma yoga in the whatever next few chapters, then comes the dhyana yoga, and then comes the bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga is where you're saying, like, look, whatever I am doing, I am letting it go, in the sense that I don't care about what I'm winning out of this. I don't care about what I'm going to lose out of this. And whatever I'm doing is I'm doing for, if you believe in God, you can say I'm doing it for God, or you can say that, hey, look, I'm not the doer. It is happening. And one of the things about that is, so through all of this path, ultimately, you are going to get to the knowledge. This is the Gyan, right? This is the Sankhya knowledge. So if you take this other effort route, this is where you're going to come. And it is necessary for you to go through all of these steps before you can say that, you have reached this stuff. So we will talk more about that over time. And not desiring doesn't rid it ever, right? So you say, okay, yeah, I'm not going to do this, right? I'm going to force myself to not do this. Well, it's going to come back in way more perverted fashion. So the year Yeah, one of the Swamis, he talks about Veda as knowledge, and Vedana is the suffering. Suffering is also like, suffering is when we know that that thing exists, right? Your hand is pricked or whatever, oh my God, my hand, right? So we are conscious about the body when the body is unhealthy. So when the body is unhealthy, you feel the existence of your leg, toe, whatever. If you're just healthy, sorry, if your toe is unhealthy, that's when you notice that there's a toe on your feet. Otherwise, it's just not there. Similarly, the constant feeling of I, according to Hinduism, is sort of a sign of unhealthy mind. So when you are just in the zone, they say, right? In the zone, you're working and you're doing something. And when you're doing that, there's a certain kind of a bliss. Well, it could be some whatever activity that you're doing in the garage or cooking or whatever, right? So there, suddenly your I has vanished. And there's nothing for you to show off to anybody. There is no pretension, nothing whatsoever, right? So you're just doing your activity. There's a certain amount of joy that comes about, right? But most of the time, the way we operate is because we try to look for validation from other people for everything that we do. We are constantly putting a layer of whatever on top of that, right? And it's according to Hindu scriptures, that is a unhealthy mind. So we make our I stronger. So I is not just this body, right? So what we are so much in I that we start increasing the circumference of it, if you will, right? So you will get a house, you will get more family, more friends, property, wealth, all of that stuff, right? Now suddenly your I has expanded, and what that also shows is that we are not really meant to be limited. We want more. That is the really true nature of us, which is we want to be infinity. And that is what Vedanta sort of concludes, right? That you are so rich, but you act as if you're a poor person. You're this person who is suffering on this planet, but you are this infinite consciousness. And that is what you want to realize, and not be limited by these desires and things that bring you down. When we lose them, we sadden because our I is weakening, right? So if a family is dying, so in this case, Arjuna's grandfather is going to be killed, or his teacher is going to kill. Now, is he really sad for that person to be dead? No, he says, this is my grandfather. So I am going to lose something. Arjuna is going to lose something, right? So it is more about I becoming weaker. And then what we do is most every action we take, we rationalize. That is where we use the brain for. We use our intellect so that the intellect, basically, who should be the boss of the mind, we make the intellect the servant of mind. And if the mind wants to do something bad, the intelligence will say, you know what, rich people do this all the time, they're way more corrupt, government does this, blah blah blah, right? We rationalize it as good. Now in this case, the example of death, we say we miss them, and or my family needs me, and so I need to be this and all of that stuff, right? But it is all about this I. This is what we need to realize, is what Krishna is going to tell Arjuna, right? Or he has been telling him. So we let's go back to our reading here. So he who control with sacrifice the Lord of creatures of all. Okay, yeah. So here he basically says, he who controlling the senses by the mind. So this is where he kind of like it talks about all the stuff that we have talked about. Now, so he's going to cover that in many different other chapters, similar thing. But now what he's doing is he's going into by doing works otherwise than for sacrifice, right? Anything that you do. So I personally don't like this terminology, sacrifice, but this author chose to use sacrifice because sacrifice tends to be more like, hey, look, I have sacrificed. So there is still that I, but I would rather call it as offering. But in Indian language, this is called as yagna. And we didn't talk about that, right? So by doing works otherwise than for sacrifice, this world of men is in bondage to works. So whatever karma you do, whatever action you do, if it is not for the betterment of everybody, it is a bondage, and that is going to cause trouble. For sacrifice practice works, right? O son of Kunti, becoming free from all attachment is key. So now this sacrifice today, you guys know the terminology yoga. So we're going to talk about this new terminology called as sacrifice, which is yagna, YAGN, which is something that I'm not sure how many people might have heard of that. So we'll just jump right into it. So yagna is, so typically back in Vedic time, before Vedanta happened, was summarized separately. There are still these rituals, right? So even today, these are the Hinduism rituals where you sit along a fire and you're offering all kinds of things like oil or, like wheat or any kind of grains and all of that, right? So part of it is you're chanting the mantra, and that is supposed to help you get something from God, right? That was the whole point of yagna. Yagna basically is done like this. Now, yagna can mean sacrifice, or it can mean action, action as an offering, right? So that is what we will focus here. Action that brings people together, reduces one's ego that they have done everything. So this notion that I am doing it, right? Arjuna had this notion that I am fighting this war. I am going to be responsible for winning the war, and I am going to be responsible for killing a grandfather and so many people. But that was not true, right? And in any activity that we do, we have this sense of entitlement that, hey, I deserve that result. I deserve that reward because I did it, right? So this doership, I did it, that is the cause for a lot of suffering. So what we have to do is we have to step back. Even though you have done your part, that doesn't mean you have done everything, right? So that is what we are getting to here. So that is what Arjuna is being taught in that section there. Our body plus pride in work, instruments, efforts, infinity, God, right? So I don't particularly like the terminology God, but God is used here. God can have so many connotations, but this really has nothing to do with God. It is just this understanding of this infinite thing or oneness with other human beings, and that all of this kind of participates in your whatever good has come out of your action, or even bad, right? So God's grace can also mean the innate power that exists in whatever raw material that maybe you needed to build your whatever activity that you're doing, right? That did not just, you didn't create that. For example, gravity. Gravity is there. So gravity is one of the gods in a way, right? So this is given to us. And this is not something human beings have created, right? So there are so many such things, right? These are the qualities of Prakriti, if you will, the nature. Now, sacrifice to me, as I said, has a notion of transaction. I sacrifice for you, hence I deserve the reward, right? So that is something. So offering is a better terminology that I will be using throughout this. Offering has a notion of service duty. I have done my part as best as I can. That's it. That's all the right that you have. And you cannot say I deserve that reward, right? So Prakriti has the gunas, right? We talked about this, tamas, rajas, and sattva. They are interplaying. That is what results into karma. When you have more tamas, as we saw, I don't know if I want to go there, but yeah. But these were the three qualities, right? So tamas is inertia, rajas is something like, think of it like a soldier action. They want to always do the action. Sattva is like, he's more into brainy activities, right? So they are not into action. So they we tend to be, most of us tend to be rajas, right? Many of us tend to be tamas, and there are few of us are sattvas. And that sort of leads to so many different karmas on this planet that might be good or bad, right? Profession is the activity or what we are not meant to do, but what we have come to offer to this world. It could be all kinds of things, right? It could be, and so this sort of took on a bad direction in India, where it amounted to being a caste system. So a priest's son would always be a priest, or Brahmin would become a Brahmin, or a king's son would become the other king, or even a businessman's son would become the businessman, or a janitor's son would become the janitor, right? So here, the way Krishna tries to, or Bhagavad Gita clearly says that, which is completely lost to Hindus, is that it is really not by birth. It is really something that comes with you, innate within you, a certain quality, certain tendency towards, like, oh, you are probably good at that. Or if it is assigned to you, you can also assume that that is something that you're serving the society by providing that action. But most of the time, we are in this desirous level of living, where desire basically means that, hey, this I that I know, I don't like this, but this other thing out there, grass is always greener on the other side, right? So you always want to be something else. Once you reach there, then you want something else, right? So whatever you have, you're never satisfied with it. That is the cycle of desire. There's a really neat story that one of the Swami mentions is, he says, so there's a poor man, and they call this fakir. So in Muslims, I guess they would mean as like monks, maybe, I guess, or poor person, but they or vagabond, I guess that's what it means. Anyways, so he is really upset, like, oh man, I wish there was a way to get all my sorrows. Somebody should get rid of all my suffering, right? He's a poor person. And he also thinks that I wish there was a way for me to, even if you cannot get rid of my suffering, God, can I exchange my sufferings to somebody else's suffering? Because maybe that other person's sufferings are not really sufferings for me. Can I possibly do that? So he's just pondering about that. And then because he's overthinking about it, he goes to sleep, and then he starts dreaming. And in the dream, basically what happens is he gets this wish granted to him, and there is an announcement that comes about in his in wherever he's living, that, hey, listen guys, come to this hall XYZ, bring all your laments and sorrows in a bag, and bring it along with you, and you will get a chance to exchange it with anybody you wish to exchange it with. And he is just ecstatic about it. Like, he says, okay. And here he packs a bag of all his sorrows, and he starts walking out, and he sees everybody's walking out, and some have big bags, some have small bags, and he notices that his bag is really smaller than everybody else's bag, so his suffering is smaller. But he says, that can't be true, like, my suffering is not smaller than theirs. And he says, oh, but those guys might be weak people, so they might think that their suffering is much larger than what I think my suffering is, right? So they all reach this hall, and everybody's welcomed, and they say there's a bunch of these hangers around where you can tie those bags. And the guy says, whoever's the owner, he basically says, okay, there's going to be a whistle, and everybody can go tie their bags to this hanger. There'll be another whistle, and you can walk over to anybody else's bag and pick his bag. So that is the thing that they're about to do. And the whistle happens, and then they put their thing, The second whistle comes when they put up their thing. He's again noticing like all these bags, different sizes, and what happens is because of all the travel, the bags have gotten loose and things start poking out of these bags, right? So now you can actually see what are the sorrows in there that these bags have. And so the second whistle comes about, and our poor person, fakir, he just says, oh, okay, the whistle has come about. He runs to his bag, his own bag, and he grabs it immediately, because he says, the problem that is known to me will be less of a problem than this other guy's problem. And then he notices that everybody else has really just picked their own bag. So it's just an interesting story about, like, the desires that we have, which is like, we think that our sorrow is something that is completely it's different from the other person's sorrow, and maybe grass is greener on the other side. Anyways, so that I thought was a really neat thing. But all of this stuff here is really based around the desire, right? Kamana or vasana. So the point of yagna, offering our actions, is purifying the action, right? Yagna. So anyways, we don't need to read about this. There's a lot more coming here. So he also says here in the verses that with sacrifice the Lord of creature of the old created creatures, right? So this is when the inception, this is when the whole planet started, and said, by this meaning, this sacrifice, this notion of you sacrificing for the rest of us, rest of everybody, by this shall you bring forth fruits or offspring. Let this be your milker of desires. So this milker of desire is kind of interesting, because in the Sanskrit version of this, it has something to do with this terminology called as kamdhenu. It's this divine cow who can fulfill any of your desires, right? So this terminology is kind of related to that. Fostered by sacrifice, the God shall give you desired enjoyments. Who enjoys their given enjoyments and has not given to them, he is a thief, right? So sometimes, you will get these benefits. During COVID, a lot of people got money from the government, which they did not deserve. So they are thieves. This is what Krishna is saying. You will get whatever you wish, you will get it. But if you were not meant to get that, you are a thief. From food. So then he goes about explaining how this comes about, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So here, the gods that they talk about is kind of interesting, right? So there are these, what do they say? They are 3.3 million gods. India has 3.3 million gods. So what does that even mean? This is such a misunderstood concept. Koti is a terminology in Indian language, meaning what is it, like 0.1 million, I guess. 100,000 is no, 100,000 is lakh. Koti is how much? I don't care. Whatever. It's just a bunch of zeros on top of one, right? More than a million, definitely. Or no, 0.1 million. Sorry, I'm confused about this. Whatever. So Koti can also mean a category, like a group. So there are 33 Koti God, mean 33 different categories of gods is what the scriptures were trying to say. And these are the highest skills, like, heat in fire. Fire has heat in it, or a flow in water, gravity, like I mentioned earlier, right? So these are some innate qualities that we humans have not done anything to achieve this. This was a God-given thing, right? So these are those things that we pray to when we say that we are going to pray to gods. So God is in that fire. We pray for fire because of that heat. We pray for the rivers and rain and all of that stuff, right? And then also the planet Earth, right? So divine manifestation is key, right? So after all this praying, action originated by Brahman, self, God, right? Whatever you want to call it, That is the reason you want to have not an action directed by or created by senses or mind, but all the way from the self, is that so that, it's not related to ego or sense pleasures, right? So in the next verse there in the book, he talks about it's a gift, or we already read about this, right? So yagna is a gift from God to humanity and everything. Animals desire, right? Animals can desire, but humans can dedicate their action, they can devote, they can offer, right? So we, only humans, maybe animals have it too, but at least from what we know is that if I do something, I might be doing it for myself, but when you have a family, when you have a wife and kids, and it's a loving whatever family, then you start learning this thing about sacrifice, where you're really doing something for the child, even though it is hurting you. And that hurt really doesn't really matter at all, as long as you can see the child happy. Now this is up to the family, then it grows into the society, right? So this notion of offering or devoting or dedicating your work to something is really a very human quality. And the fact that we act mostly desirously only for self purposes, to bring in more belongings for yourself, that is very much like an animal, is what the scripture is going to say. Respect the nature's contribution in the act, right? So whatever you do, you did not create the heat in the fire. So at least, pay respect to the nature. Understand others' involvement. When you say, I have done it, there are more people that might have contributed to it. Otherwise, you are a common thief. Action by God within oneself as service to God, right? So we talked about the how you can, when the senses are gone out of control, mind can control the senses. When mind has gone out of control, your intellect can control the mind. When the intellect goes out of control, to control that, when can an intellect go out of control? That is where ego can get built. So when the intellect is trying to do an action that is whatever, that action needs to be considered as an offering to the service, to the society, or the society is really, it is God. So God has two ways to be looked at. God is either a creator with createes, which is us and the planet. So it is kind of like a sculptor who does a statue, and the sculptor is sitting outside, so it's dualistic. There is that. The other way to look at God is sort of like a dancer. A dancer, the dance itself cannot be separate from the dancer. So you need the dancer as well. So that is the notion that Indian scriptures try to bring about, which is God is everywhere. This is God. This whole thing is God. Even the worst people on the planet are also part of that same God, right? So whatever you do, you go to your office, you work there, that work you need to be, you want to look at that as a service done to whatever, right? Cause. You could be the CEO of the company, right? But even a CEO can have a lot of humility, and that helps in a lot of things, right? Then there is this growth cycle that Krishna talks about. Yagna helps, our offering helps rain, and then food comes about, life comes about, and then that goes back in the yagna, and then this cycle continues. Now, what does that mean, right? So this is kind of interesting. And one of the Swamis explains it like this, right? So we are meant to prosper. This life has been given to us to prosper. We like growth. We like to, be better selves of ourselves, right? That is what it is meant for. And what do we need for that? We typically need nutrition, and that is food. Rain gives us food, right? And rain, apparently, at least in the Sanskrit word that they use, there are other meanings for that word. One of the meaning is when everyone comes together. That is good for prosperity, for self and for others. So that is one of the things that this might mean.
Sashi.
Yes.
Can you maximize the screen? If you change to the slideshow on the view.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that'd be much better. Thank you.
Okay. And yagna gives us rain. Offering one's action as service brings us together, right? So this notion that I am doing something rather than just for me, but it is really for others, it really makes others start loving you, right? It starts building this notion of teamwork if you were in the office environment, or even at home, or whatever in the society, right? So this particular section really covers that, right? So from food, all of that happens. And so the point here he is trying to say to Arjuna is that, look, your action is not just your own action. So don't let it go to your head. And so he then goes about that. And then he basically says that it was even by works that Janaka and the rest attained to perfection. If you read the Upanishads and a lot of other scriptures, Janaka is one of our philosopher kings, and he stayed as a king throughout his lifetime, but he was also considered as a big philosopher, and he is very revered. So Krishna actually brings him here. He says it was even by works that Janaka and the rest attained to perfection, right? So they were perfect. They were also, in Krishna's definition of a renunciate, or a reached soul, or a yogi, or a sannyasi, he would say that Janaka is a sannyasi, even though he was a king. He enjoyed all the royalties and everything, but he was such a good philosopher, and he still did his actions, right? So he's trying to remind Arjuna, think about him. Thou shouldst do works regarding also the holding together of the peoples, right? So it's not just enough for you to think about yourself. You're worried about yourself, like what is going to happen to your family and all of that. But you haven't thought, look at everybody, helpless people, so many helpless people. You're the only one who is a warrior and has this power to kind of help this society. They're really looking up to you, and you are really not, you should not run away from this. Whatsoever the best doeth, that the lower kind of man puts into practice, right? There is another thing. This is really, really also one more thing that, when we are doing our actions, there is I'm going to talk a little bit about social media here, right? So we tend to want to advise others all the time. So social media is all about finding problems in other people. You look at all the tweets and everything, right? Hey, you should do this. And then is something good they hear, like, oh, these are the 5 steps that you do, whatever, something good is going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And then what you do is you just post it. You post it and you let others do this. So one of the things that Oscar Wilde says is, advice is best given to others. So it never really, you never really apply it to yourself. So when you're doing the yagna, where you're offering, remember the yagna is that action that you have done, not with your senses, not with your mind, but with your intellect, but as an offering to the God, right? So karma yoga, that yagna, you want to always think about every action that you do is, how can you be the role model for the society? You cannot just go around telling people that, hey, you should not be eating meat, or you should not be hurting the planet, or you should not be, doing all the plastic waste and all of that stuff, right? Eat organic, right? So we're always advising others, right? That Krishna is warning against being condescending to others, right? So he's saying, just do your thing. Do your thing, because everybody's watching, even though they're not really watching. Even your parents are watching you. You could be a role model to your parents. Like I feel like I learn a lot from my daughter, or my son. So that happens. It has nothing to do with age. It has nothing to do with your power. It is just how you act. You're not even like doing it so that somebody is going to say, oh my God, you've done such a great thing and I'm going to do it. No, that's not the point. Assume that somebody's watching you. When somebody's watching you, how can it be a role model for that person. So he is saying, always do that, right? Whatever action you're doing, be a role model. So here he's saying, Arjuna, if you're going to run away from here, imagine if people just did that. This society will be a chaos. Society exists because we are all helping each other. And he says, everybody's looking at you as a warrior, important warrior for this war. But if you are going to run away from this, that's not setting a good role model. So be here. There are so many soldiers who are not your brothers and sisters. They are here to fight for you. And here you are running away because your grandpa is going to get killed. So he's warning him against that, right? Every object should manifest divinity in the subject. So this is another thing that Swami talks about, is that this world, objects, there's so many objects here, our thought process, our anger, our fear, whatever, everything, right? Everything. You want to use that to manifest divinity. What does that even mean? Manifest divinity does not mean like Jesus is going to come down or Krishna is going to come down. That's not the point. The point is that whatever good, whatever you consider as divine, be that yourself, right? So, if you want happiness from some activity, somebody is going to bring me happiness. No, when you're doing the activity, just be happy. That's it. When you're happy, you're doing the activity, that is happiness. Don't wait for the happiness to come after a result is going to come to you, right? So everything in this world, whatever good, bad is happening, politics, your business, your Wall Street, your, whatever, everything, fights between husband and wife, all of that can be used for your self-growth. So you can step away, not step away in the sense, oh, look, wifey, I'm not going to fight with you. No, that's not the point. You engage in that conversation, but watch how you are getting angry, possibly. The moment you watch your anger, that anger dissolves into forgiveness. That is one of the things that they talk about in some Upanishad that I forget right now. But the point is that if you take this notion of a witness of yourself doing something, that act itself becomes ridiculous. And you change your format. They said, right, like if you're angry about someone and if you want to really respond, if you just wait for 24 hours, your response is going to look so much different the next day. I think it was Dale Carnegie or something who had that in his book. So nothing should disturb our mental calmness, right? Typically, it's if your mind is just wavering and like you get really super anxious or angry or whatever, that means that the desire has crept in. So you're not really in that mode of doing the actionlessness. Our senses detect, eye sees the object, our mind registers it, intellect comprehends consciousness. Okay, so let's just get back to this. So that's, so yeah, I mean, we tend to blame everybody except yourself, right? So this is where, when we are on the social media, when we are on whatever, right? So literally, this thing is going to explode as we go further, right? Metaverse or whatnot, everything. It is going to keep exploding. So the point is, how can you bring back all these worldly experiences for your self-growth? Whatever is being put out there, look at yourself and think about, is this, whatever my reaction is it coming from my senses or my mind or my intellect? And am I really doing it as an offering to the society or the God, right? Whatever I'm doing. So that is going to bring a different quality of life, I guess. So let's see. And when you're on this path, it is going to be tough. So you definitely, one of the things he says is, you really need, in Indian language, this would be called a Shraddha. Shraddha is like faith and belief is like Vishwas, right? So belief means that, oh, I want to believe this, but, I still have doubts, but I'm going to believe it because you're my friend. But faith is different, right? Faith has nothing to do with your religious faith or whatnot. It just means that, like, let's say if I am going to want to become I'm a 10th grader. I have no idea about this world. I don't know what this education is going to lead to, but I know I want to do this. Like, this is what is going to be good. So I have to put some faith in that teacher, in that university that I'm going to be signing up for, that something good is going to happen. And I'm going to practice all the books that they're going to give to me, all the lectures they're going to give to me. And that is what he talks to him. He says, Krishna says in one of the verses that you're going to need faith in this. Faith is absolutely going to be key. This is not easy. And don't hurt yourself. Be patient with yourself. It is going to take a lot of time, because these habits that have happened to us has happened over lots of years, and lots of conditioning has gone along the way. So it's going to take some time. And then there is this notion of like, what is my duty? Like, how do I find what am I good for? So there is this idea of swabhava. It basically means that this is my character. Like, I'm an angry person, or I like certain, like, I don't like outdoors maybe, or I like more outdoors, or, so there is this innate quality. There's something that, we already have. These are habits and traits. And these sometimes, if you tend to act based on that, they tend to be mindless, in the sense that you are really, like, they can become mechanical actions. But Swarupa is where you have gone beyond the intellect, and now you are questioning, not quite questioning, but really, like, whatever this sense wants to do. Like, there is a cake in front of me, my tongue wants to taste it. So my mind is in dilemma, and the brain is thinking about it. And you are watching all these activities that are going on, right, as a consciousness. So that is that mindfulness, acting consciously, mental. So typically in your mind, so one of the Swami basically tries to explain how to think about how can you use God in a positive way in your life. There are a lot of these people who go around with these little beads on their fingers, and then they kind of roll it like a million times. And he says that does nothing. That's not the point. The point is that, our mind, even if we have closed our eyes and we are in a Zen state, not quite Zen, but, our so-called contemplation or meditation state, our thoughts are always like this chain of thoughts immediately start in our mind. Just close your eyes, go to a quiet place, close your eyes, and say, okay, I'm not going to think anything. Literally in half a second, you start thinking about your, maybe your kitchen door, or, fridge, and then what's in the fridge, and then what am I going to have for dinner, blah, 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 right? And you end up in some place that you were like, it will just completely surprise you. So, and then people might say that, oh my God, that is bad. So you need to stop that, right? But you cannot really quite stop that. So one of our important monks was Raman Maharshi. He basically says, let them come, let those thoughts come. It's okay. But what this guy says is that you can just, when that happens, right, think of any deity you want, Jesus or Rama or whatever. You just utter that name, and that sort of breaks the chain of thoughts. Because the idea is that these chain of thoughts lead you into a place where it's all built up in your mind, but that starts causing some kind of a pain or suffering to you without even actually it happening out there. And you might feel way elated about some person or way bad about some person, even before that person has done anything bad or good, right? So, and that is what you need to break. And that is the mindfulness stuff, right? So when we are thinking about meditation and stuff, you could utilize God in a positive way, right? So there would be an inner calling, which is typically out of our control, that you would know over time. In a family, even with the same kind of upbringing, you will notice that both the kids will typically have different traits, and one might go into a musical direction and the other might go into engineering or something, right? So that is something that they have come with, and that is what is this Swadharma, is that they are going to find that inner calling, and that is what will guide you to identify what your true action is on this planet. How can you be best when you are offering or servicing this society? So I'm not sure if I should keep going or should I take a pause here. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that you. So I think you are still on the chapter 3.
I think so. So I can just keep. Let me just.
So you want to pause here, then have a question, or you want to finish chapter 3, then does have a question, and then we
Okay.
probably have to do chapter 4 next time.
Okay, let me finish this. Yeah, you're right. Let me
Yeah.
kind of jump through this.
So we have another 40 minutes. So
okay.
so
Giving up.
probably try to finish chapter 3 and then have a
Okay.
question and
Okay,
discussion.
great. So why does he say you want to give up the offering? We talked about this, right? Giving up thy works to me. This me he's talking about here is not Krishna, but really that larger self. And Jesus uses similar terminology, right? In his whatever. With thy consciousness founded in the self, give up thy works, right? Free from, why do you want to do that? Free from desire and egoism, fight, delivered from the fever of thy soul, right? So you want to do this really with full heart, right? All existence follow their nature, and what shall coursing it avail? Even the man of knowledge acts according to his nature. We talked about that, right? So there's this inner calling that you want to follow. Better is one's own law of works, swadharma, though in itself faulty, right? So this is another thing, right? We tend to be doing something and we suddenly see like, oh man, I wish I was a lawyer. Like maybe I'm an engineer, I wish I was a lawyer. And I start like thinking about law or something right in the middle of the career. And, which means like I'll have to uproot everything and, start all over again. And, or somebody might have told me like, hey, maybe you should try law and you're going to make more money, blah blah blah, right? So what Krishna is trying to say is that don't doubt what you're good at. So whatever you're good at, it is better for you to continue doing that even if you're not on the spiritual path, because that is better than you going on a wrong path. Because Arjuna wanted to become a monk, right? Even though he's a warrior. And he says that better is one's own law of works, swadharma, as a warrior, though in itself faulty, than an alien law well wrought out. So this path of knowledge, path of monk might be good for Buddha, but definitely not good for Arjuna, is what he's saying. Death in one's own law of being is better. Perilous is it to follow an alien law. Now, one more thing I just want to kind of bring here in this is we really don't know when this thing was written, but the overall Indian religious, growth, if you will, how it happened, from the Indus Valley and all the religions came about, and then Buddhism came about, Jainism came about. There was this whole thing around Buddhism. When it came, it was a revolt against Hinduism, right? So they said that these Hindus, they have become very corrupt, the priests, and they are really causing so much pain in the society. And so Buddha comes up with this totally new concept. It is rooted in Hinduism. A lot of his concepts are exactly the same as what Krishna is saying, but he chose the path of becoming a complete beggar in a way, right? So his most primary thing was that begging is the way to live. Drop all your belongings, go away, right? And that became very fashionable back then. when Buddhism came about, it was very, very popular. And what happened is there was a total chaos in the society. A lot of people were leaving their houses, and there was a sort of a malaise, if you will, right? So it was just not good for the society. So a lot of the Hindu scriptures that came about, be it Shankaracharya or a lot of these people, I don't know, but maybe I don't know if Bhagavad Gita was written about then, or was it written earlier than that? But there was always this Hinduism, the highest point or the best path there was always about renunciation. Becoming a monk or becoming a priest was always considered as the best thing that you can do, and which is what Buddha does. And the society gets into a chaos, then the Hindu folks sort of come together, try to bring the society together with the understanding of Vedanta, saying that, look, this is what it is. And whatever you're going to do as a monk or a sannyasi or a renunciate, you can do that here, living in your family. How you behave with other people, you can behave as if you're a renunciate. You can still show love, you can do all your actions. And a lot of this dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, it kind of, to me, seems like it is trying to kind of balance out this notion in Hinduism that renunciation is the only best path. And Krishna is basically saying, live in this world. This is the best sannyas, or this is the best thing you can do for yourself. So Arjuna asks here, but what is this in us that drives a man to sin, right? So this is, again, I think we have talked a lot about the desire, so I'm going to skip that. And what happens to this desire is that as a fire is covered over by smoke, as a mirror by dust, as an embryo is wrapped by the amnion, so this knowledge is enveloped by it. So this is really key. Key in the sense that, deep within us, we do have this knowledge. We have an understanding. But what has happened is, depending on the nature of us, like, some people are very close to the understanding, some people are very much in darkness, right? So this covering that has happened, that blocks this knowledge, and we are all running, helter-skelter because of our desires, it can have severe and less severe consequences. For some people, it might just be like fire is covered over by smoke. So you just kind of wipe away the smoke and you can see the fire. It might be as easy as that for people, some people. For some people, it might be as a mirror by dust, right? So you have to actually pick up a rag and kind of clean it, right? So think of this first one as the sattva, where he's already very close to the knowledge, and it is easy for him to just waft away the smoke, and then immediately he can see the knowledge. For somebody, you have to pick up the rag and clean the mirror. But there might be another kind of lazy people, tamasic people, who it is kind of like an embryo is wrapped by the amnion. So it is very, very hard to get to the knowledge for some of the people, and they choose to stay in darkness. So I'm going to cover a little bit of next section, and then I'm going to stop in another, let's say 10 minutes. So one of the things that he continues, right? So here, notice every chapter, Arjuna starts with a question. But here, after he's presented all of this stuff, he feels like, Arjuna is now, he kind of gets a sense that I think he's understanding, or he is willing to learn, not understanding, but willing to learn. So he comes out with even more profound statement here. He says that this imperishable yoga, or this knowledge, right? So this karma yoga, I gave to Vivasvan, the sun god. Vivasvan, the sun god, gave it to Manu, the first man, right? And then that first man gave to his son, which was Ikshvaku. He was the head of the solar line, or the solar dynasty at that time. Now, this has a very there was a god, and then there was the sun god, you talk to that sun god, and then the sun god talked to this first man, all of that stuff, right? But there is another way to understand this, which is that when he says I is the consciousness that we have talked about, the self. The sun god sort of is the, if you will, the intelligence, right? And then Manu, the first man, is the mind, and Ikshwaku are the senses. So the knowledge is deep within us, and it is passed along through these channels, right? And that knowledge is imperishable. It has always been, whoever reaches, right, no matter where he is on the planet. It could be Jesus, it could be Muhammad, it could be Krishna, it could be whoever, Buddha. If you look at their teachings all the way at the final essence of their teaching, it is so similar, and what they're talking about. They might be trying to solve the puzzles for a warrior, or they might be trying to solve the puzzles for the slaves, in Egypt or whatever, or anything else. Ultimately, if you look at their philosophy, it really boils down to something very similar all across. So that's why he calls this as very imperishable, right? And this is kind of interesting to comprehend directly. So let's see. I can just flip through these slides and see if there's something interesting here. Yeah, Ikshwaku, this name is kind of interesting. As I was reading on Quora, somebody had explained this. Iksha means being, looking, and Vaku is desire. And that's where that understanding comes about, is when combined, it means desire attractor, which is what our senses are, right? So Ikshwaku also means like a sugar and bitter gourd. So together, right? So that the senses are sweet and horrible at the same time, if you will. Let's see. Oh, then he talks about what is an avatar, because he is explaining that there are so many things that happen. Humans get born, but once in a while, when there is so much darkness on the planet, then an avatar is born. It is sort of reincarnation of God. But the way to understand this is, way back, at least there must have been a personality by the name Vishnu, but Vishnu is also one of our gods. But this Vishnu might have done some really amazing act. And through generations, the memory of that act has sort of morphed into making him like a superhuman, right? And those superhuman qualities, we tend to, like, if somebody shows a very superhuman behavior on this planet, like Buddha, for example, we tend to say he's a reincarnation of that Superman, Vishnu, right? So that is sort of like the notion of avatar. And then this the sannyas and sadhu, we talked about that, right? So here again, he tries to convince in chapter 4 to him that really you don't have to go to the forest, you don't have to go anywhere. Sannyasa is here. You can be here. You can be renunciate in the sense that you don't desire for things, and you can still continue doing your actions, right? And we talked about that. We talked about that. Action and actionless. We talked about that. Ultimately, the whole chapter is in Indian language, at least. It is called as let's see. It is called as Jnana Karma Sannyas Yoga. Remember, we are reading from two different books, right? One is the translation from Aurobindo Ghosh, and the other is from Gandhi. So Gandhi's book will have this name, Gyan Karma Sannyas Yoga. So trying to go do your renunciation with absolutely no knowledge or karma is idiotic, is what Krishna tells him. That is, a lot of people do that. They are not doing the right thing. That is not how you do it. So you really want to understand, knowledge is key. And that is what he says. This is ultimate offering that you can give to God, or whatever, infinity, is, you are giving up your desire, you're giving up your senses, You are going to be controlling your mind, all of that, right? Belongings, you're not going to be amassing a lot of wealth, blah, blah, blah. Or you can, but you do it as if it's an offering for the society. But really, ultimately, all of these, it's kind of a ladder. So you're not going to be stuck in one place. You are going to be moving on to, all you're doing is to understand yourself, understand that self that is acting through you. And that is the final offering, he says, right? And then, of course, you want to go into sannyasa and all of that stuff. But that again confuses Arjuna in chapter 5. He says, oh, you tell me about dissolving actions by doing the karma, and then you want me to do karma, and then you also want me to offer it to somebody else. And that's just very confusing, right? What is explain to me what renunciation is, which is what chapter 5 is going to be. All right, I'm going to stop now. Sorry about
So
that.
you finished to chapter 4?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
so
good. So you take 90% of time doing chapter 3, and then
I know. That's what happens. I think chapter 3 is sort of interesting. I would say chapter 2 is by far everything is given in chapter 2. Like if you just read chapter 2, from there on, it's all the details, like all the way up to 18, which are marvelous, because we all are like Arjuna, confused. So yeah. Questions, guys? Anybody?
Yeah, I had a question. So you were talking about Manu, right? And if you go by the definition, Vishwaswata Manu is the seventh in the cycle. So do you have any notion of the timeline of when this might have happened? If you go by the Chaturyug cycle, it states that current Kal Yuga is like around 420 years, 420,000 years, and then Dwapar Yuga is when the Mahabharata is supposed to happen, which is about 800,000 years. And towards the end of Dwapar is when Mahabharata happened. This is what the current, thought process is, which many researchers believe would have happened close to 3,500 BC. And if you go back further, you were talking about Ishwaku as well, right? Who was the starting of the dynasty, Sun dynasty, in which Sri Ram actually inherited, right? And that happened in Treta Yuga, which is supposed to be 1.2 million years, and then Satya Yuga is 1.8. So this is just one cycle, and then there are several of those cycles. So how would you quantify the timeline? Do you have any notion about that?
In my first lecture, I mentioned that I have absolutely zero interest in timeline or historical accuracy. I have no interest. If somebody proves to me Krishna did not exist, it doesn't matter. The message is important. And I hope to God that there was a person like Krishna. I hope to God that there was a person like Jesus, for that matter, or Muhammad, for that matter, right? So these people, these characters exist for us to learn something. And how does it impact my life if it was proven that this happened so many million years ago? So my interest is not really about history or timeline, but what is interesting to me when I read about these millions and millions of years, or how back our Puranas talk about, is it's just this notion of timeline, right? So the cycle of time, everything comes and goes, and everything, the Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, Satya Yuga, Dwapar. So there are 4 yugas, guys, right? Satya Yuga is the best yuga. Dwapar is the next yuga, or a total cycle of time where some things happen. Then there is the Treta Yuga, 3rd yuga, and then Kali Yuga, that is the 4th yuga. We are part of the 4th yuga, where everything is going to be destroyed. And then the Satya Yuga starts again, right? So there is this infinite notion of time in Hinduism versus other religions. They have different notion of time. So that is important for me. But yeah, no, I really don't have, sorry, I don't have the information on that. Yeah, but that was good point. Thank you.
Or Ralph have a question.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I have a question about the rejection of the idea of action for results. I mean, it seems to me that text is not entirely consistent on this, and you've mentioned some examples of also of things being virtuous because of their results. In the text in particular, I think this goes back to chapter 2, it says that Arjuna has to fight. If he doesn't fight, he will bring shame on himself and people will scorn him. Well, that's an ethic of results.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of other things. You mentioned that this war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas was a just war. Therefore, winning the war would make society better. Again,
that is also a result. Yeah.
That's also a result. You mentioned if somebody sacrifices something for their child, presumably that's a good thing, but it's also for the benefit of the child. I guess you said and I guess, I don't know whether this was specific to Arjuna, if somebody runs away, I guess, from action or from something, this will result in chaos.
There's a result.
I wondered if you could just look into this. Do we really want to completely get rid of an ethic of results, or is that also significant? Thanks.
Yeah. No, that's a very awesome view or an observation. So this is how I understand it, right? That or I've also had people mention that Swami's mentioned that. So action without a result. So what does that mean? So when we are taking an action with complete focus on the result, why do we want to achieve the result? Because the result is going to make us happy, right? That is always the situation, isn't it? So the idea is that, no, you disagree with that?
Well, in the case of the war, to make the society a better place.
Yeah, but it is going to bring about happiness.
Okay,
so
for everybody.
For everybody, yeah. So okay. So I think always a result is associated with a happiness that is about to come. So the point that he is trying to make when you're doing your actions is that when you think about before you come to an action and you're about to act, but then while acting, your mind is completely biased with the result, considering the result. So there might be two things, right? You might get the result or you might not get the result. So you might win or you might lose. And if you think you're going to win, there is something good is going to happen and all of that stuff, right? So in this case, what happened with Arjuna with the war is that he already projected his win. He projected his win, meaning the opposite party is going to die. That was not given. So to go into an action with that much ego is the problem that he's talking about. He's saying, what gives you this right to even say that, you are actually going to kill your grandpa? The grandpa was a great warrior. There were the best warriors on the other side too. He could get killed. He doesn't know. So he's saying that don't bring your desires to win because you think that this is what is going to be good, or your fear that you're going to cause so many deaths. And the other thing is what happens if you lose, right? And maybe with Arjuna it would probably be okay with him, right? Because he already wanted to give up. So the point, at least in the context of that war, is that his confusion comes about because he's already projecting his win. That confusion would not have happened had he just kind of just not even considered that he might win, not even considered that he might lose. Similarly, now how does that impact to us in our situation, right? When we are acting, first of all, right, I think we we don't tend to do actions. Many a times, what we are doing is reactions. So somebody has put something out there, in the society as an attraction or something we like or something we don't like. And we tend to, most of our actions are reactions to the society. The pure action is the spontaneous action. So you just I'm just doing it, right? So that does not happen. First of all, that's the action can be as simple as you want to get angry at somebody, or you want to fight something bad that is happening in the society or whatever, right? So the way we go about it is always a reaction, and it comes about with a notion of I like this or I hate this. So the like and hate drives our reaction in a way. So we are already trying to win that thing that we like, and we are trying to destroy that thing that we don't like. So that particular thing, whatever is going to come about, your action is biased as you're going about it. So that is one way to look at it. And that biased action is only going to result in a suffering in the long run, even though you get to whatever you like. Maybe you're trying to win a girl or something, I don't know, or you hate your neighbor or something, right? So that is what. So all of this is really pointing to is there is a distinction between action and the doership. So doership has a notion of ego, and that ego comes about from the fact that that doer has a desire. So all Krishna is trying to say is distinguish an action from a doer. Don't take the responsibility. You have been called upon taking that action. Don't let that result go to your head, and don't let the failure go to your head. And there's another way to look at it is when you are about to set on the path to that goal, so you already have that result, right? That result is going to bring about an happiness after the result comes about. Well, don't think about the result. So the direction is clear. You want to go that way. Now drop the result. So you are working on it. The happiness that you're going to gain after the result is going to come. Express that happiness now. As you're on the path itself is the result, is what one way to look at it is, be happy along the way. Because if you go into the action with the stress of the result, that action is already, now you're 50% on that action, right? The point is you can tone down the focus on the result, and now you happily do your action on the path, be on the path. Now you're 100% in that, right? In the action itself. And more than likely, you're going to do a better job with that approach. So there are multiple ways to look at this with different contexts, and it is quite a useful thing, I would say, in a way. Yes, we are goal oriented. That's what drives our prosperity and all of that. But I think attaching to the goal can affect our efforts that we are trying to put in that action.
So then I have a question on the yajna.
Yagna.
Okay, you keep talking about yajna, but in the text I don't see yajna. So what?
Oh yeah, that is the Sanskrit name. In text, he talks about sacrifice.
So yajna is a sacrifice, and sometimes you talk about offering.
I don't like sacrifice. I like to call it as offering. So it's kind of like, the yagna basically would be like a fire, and you would put things in fire. Okay, that was the ritual part of it. But the idea is that when you are doing this sacrifice or an offering in this ritual, you are basically looking at items in your life that are very close to you, and how would it impact you when you give up that particular activity or that belonging? Does that make sense, Jason?
Yeah, okay. So
Yeah,
that
so-
okay. So if you go to the chapter 4, verses 28, right? So he talk about the offer of the striver. I'm reading the three.
Oh yeah, the offering of the striver.
So
after
the
perfection.
offering, should we read as yagna?
Sorry. Yeah, let's read that. The offering of the striver, right? The striver is somebody who wants something. After perfection, maybe, the offering of the striver after perfection. So there are different kinds of yagnas is what this particular verse is talking about. Some people might be after dravya yagna, means they want some material thing or a physical thing, right?
Oh,
So
that's
they,
what they want, not
what they want,
need.
right? So
Okay.
then they offer. So they tell God, hey, look, I'm going to give up a cake for 1 year. And can you give me a son, right? So it's a transaction that you are kind of bargaining, right? So you offer your craving for the son, for the cake, and then you say, okay, I'm going to get this in return, right? Or it may be the austerity of his self-discipline. So the many times people will say, okay, well, I'm going to always bike ride to the office. God, I'm not going to drive the car, and can you make increase my salary or something? So that is the self-discipline path, right? So there is the material path. There are material prayer offerings. There is the self-discipline prayer offerings, and then there is what else? Energy of his soul.
Yasna.
Yeah, and then there is the yoga. So we do yoga for body. So think of this, right? There is the material, there's the self-discipline, and then there's the body. So you're also sitting quietly and you're doing this breathing exercises, right? All of those yogas that you do. The yoga, why do you do yoga? Because it is going to bring you some perfection. So you're craving after that perfection, right? So that is also an offering. Or it may be the offering of reading and knowledge, right? So a lot of people say, hey, you know what? I'm going to read this. I'm going to learn about this thing. It requires sacrifice, isn't it? We are not going to be watching Netflix. We are going to be sitting and reading this stuff. So that's an offering to him, to God. But he says is others who are, next one he talks about prana, means breathe control. That is also an offering. And he keeps going down, right? The list. Others have regulated food, immortality, right? So that is what they want. But at some point he says that ultimately the sacrifice of knowledge, number 33, he says the sacrifice of knowledge, O Parantapa, means Arjuna, is greater than any of the sacrifices that I have told so far. Knowledge is that in which all this action culminates. So what he's saying is, let's say you're after material, right? Let's say you want $1 million. And so it's fine for you to get those $1 million. That's fine, he says. But that is the first step in the ladder. Then let's say you want to do some self-discipline, where you have come to an understanding that you're not going to eat so much sweet or ice cream or whatever, right? And then you come to an understanding that, oh, I need to work on my body, right? So all of these things that you're sacrificing, ultimately, he says that there is one more step that you want to take, which is understand the self, gain that one knowledge that is so important for you to gain. It's what happens is many times people get stuck on this ladder, and then they are either stuck in gaining more material benefits, or they are very much busy in this yogic thing, right, where they are doing the yogas every day, and then they think that they're going to achieve. He says, no, just by doing yogas, you're not going to achieve anything. It's a waste of time. He says that these efforts are supposed to, for you to climb. Everything is for transcendence. Everything. Whatever I'm doing, you're presenting Chinese literature, you're presenting so many things, I'm presenting Hinduism. This is not just for presenting sake. This is for me, my soul, to feel better or go to that next step, right? Any action we do, we want to think in terms of where am I on that ladder? And he's not criticizing any of those steps on the ladder. He says, you're materialistic, that's okay. That's okay. At some point, you're going to climb that next step, right? That's what that means. Does that make sense, Jason?
Okay, so basically, the translation sometimes called the offering. So, for example, I have the problem with, like you said, on the 33, right? The sacrifice of knowledge. What they mean? You lose your knowledge or you get knowledge?
Oh, no. Oh, okay. That's a really good question. Okay, so now see the unfortunate.
So I got confused. Like okay, I give up my knowledge, right?
Yeah, let me explain that. Right. So sacrifice of knowledge means that, it is easy for me to like if ice cream is kept in front of me, I always bring up ice cream. I think I love ice cream. But if ice cream is kept in front of me, my tongue would want to taste it. I want to eat it, right? But to control those senses, it takes effort. So you are going to sacrifice something, the joy that you might get by eating the ice cream, right? That is sacrificing the senses.
Yeah.
Then it's the mind. So when it comes to mind, you have the dilemma. You say, oh, do I want to do this? This is going to help me. That's not going to help me, blah, blah, blah. It's always in relativity, if you will. Mind is always like, this is better, that is not better. This is better, that is not better. Let me take this easy path. And that easy path might be destructive to the society, but you still do it, like throwing trash everywhere or drinking plastic bottle water and throwing plastic everywhere, right? So those kind of things, right? So now you say, mind, shut up. Let me think about this intelligently. So you are controlling, you're sacrificing what you would have naturally done to some better path, right? That's a sacrifice for somebody.
So I naturally want to study Bhagavad Gita. Then
no, hold on. I'm getting there. I'm getting step by step there. So now what happens is you have come up to intellect. Now he says that you want to sacrifice the knowledge itself, right? So these learnings here, what he's talking about is sacrifice of knowledge. You're not sacrificing the knowledge. The knowledge that you have gained, right? When you even rise above the intellect, now what you're saying is everything that I do is not for me, not for my family, not for anything. This is for God. To that itself, it is easy to say, but to do it, it's extremely hard. Okay. But when you start doing it, what would happen is maybe your belongings are going to go down. Your possessions are going to go down because you're not going to be greedy. You're not going to be profit-minded, right? You're not really participating in this culture of greed, right? And you might become poor. So it's a sacrifice in a way, but that sacrifice is the most important sacrifice. And what is happening is you're gaining the knowledge, the right knowledge, the only knowledge that matters. In some chapter later on, Krishna talks about it. People spend so much time on learning so many things. None of it matters. Once you know that knowledge, that kind of guides everything that you do, all the actions you do are always good actions. Are they good for the society? Then it is okay for you to learn physics. Then it is okay for you to learn nuclear science. Then it is okay for you to manufacture the atomic bombs as well. But you're not going to be doing bad at that point. So but if you don't have that fundamental knowledge, and then you are acting in this society, which is what is the condition for all of us, what happens is we have created a society that is ultra chaotic. We are hurting the planet. We are causing, everybody is profit minded. It is the materialism, right? And this is in fact what Aurobindo Ghosh, right? His stress about, as India was becoming independent from Britishers going out, he was very much against the notion of Britishers just leaving the country. He thought that India we need to create this, he called that person an integral man or integral yoga, right? So it was a very loftier goal, I guess. A lot of people didn't quite understand what he was trying to say, but it is a good goal for us to think about as we are becoming more and more of a citizen of the world rather than a citizen of a country in a way, right? We still belong to a country, but we still have to act as if I'm going to impact the little country out in South Africa, for example, whatever actions I do here in a prosperous country like America, right? So that is the thing, right? So whatever I sacrifice, whatever I say, oh, I don't want to do this because it might impact whoever, that is a sacrifice. That's an offering, right?
Okay, so sacrifice analogy basically the purpose is to step up.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got you. So I think that helped a lot. Okay.
And also people get stuck in the knowledge itself.
Yeah,
People
don't attend, just
in the book.
Just attach to the knowledge. Yeah.
Wisdom. Knowledge is not wisdom quite, right? So once you get that ultimate thing, drop the knowledge. It's like Buddha, I think in some Zen story, Buddha says, if you come across me on the path, kill me.
Yeah, so you just throw away the Bhagavad Gita, then you know everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, true. So sometimes these things that come through books is actually kind of handicap. It makes us handicap in a way because we're not really self-exploring. What happens is we think, oh, somebody said honesty is best policy, so let me do it. As against, no, from inside, I feel that honesty is the right thing, right? Two different things. I'm either doing it because the book says, and that book is praised by a lot of people, or am I really feeling it from inside, right? So for that, I might have to lie and I might have to do all kinds of bad things to realize, wait a second, that really was not good for the society. And that's why I want to be honest. Right?
Okay,
Anyway.
Sashi, we run out of time, and sorry, AG,
Sure.
wait for a long time, and then you have the last question, please. Sorry.
So Sashi, so really thank you for doing this thing. So if you can briefly, there are two things that I wanted to ask. So one is you talked about sattvic, tamasic, and rajasic, right? And those are generally the qualities. It is said that kind of food that you eat also can be divided into these three categories, and it impacts the behaviors that you have. So that's one question. And the second question, you was pointing out that yoga is about exercise. So I wanted to just correct you there that it's not about exercise.
No, it is not.
Exercise is just
the way our society understands. The way our society understands is not.
Ask my question so that you can talk after that. So yoga. So as you understand, there are multiple areas. So one is basically yoga, which is karma yoga, which is about work. Then you have bhakti yoga, that is about like your devotion towards the God. And then you also have meditation basically. So it is basically dhyan yoga, and there are multiple others as well. So only in the US society it is thought of as exercise. That's not true. So just wanted to point you to that direction as well. So
I already, that is exactly what my point is, that yoga, a lot of people understand, even in the old ages, right? The breathing exercises, and that is what people were stuck in. In fact, that is what Krishna is commenting there in one of the lines here, right? I don't know, is it 29, right? He says controlling they're controlling their breath, and they think that that's something really good. So but that is one step. So you want to go beyond that, right? So everything is, you want to use it for transcendence, going to the next step. You don't want to get stuck in anything that you're doing, right? Anyway, so that's good. Cool. That's it.
Okay.
Jason.
Anything about food, the food items? That was the first question.
The food, the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic, about the food part, right? It kind of, I think the whole rest of the chapters, everything is going to be about those three qualities. I guarantee you that he's going to cover that. But the notion that some kind of food are sattvic and others are tamasic and all of that, I think there is a quality of when you eat food, it kind of creates a certain kind of mentality. Like if you're drinking a lot of alcohol and all of that, that is very rajasic. And so, you tend to do whatever you do. The sattvic will eat mellow foods, simple foods, maybe not non-veg, but I'm not too worried about that. Like I'm not really too concerned about that. Ultimately, what it means to me is that there are these three gunas or three attributes given to every element in the society that drives their action. Now, when that action happens, what you can do is you can think about that action in the terms of what Krishna is saying. Don't get worried that, oh, you are very materialistic, or you are a butcher, or you are a thief. That's not the point. Think of your action as a transcendence vehicle. right? There are so many things in Mahabharata. Actually, there's a butcher who actually becomes a advice giver. So there's a small booklet about that, where he becomes a person who gives Vedic knowledge to a Brahmana, which is completely opposite, right? So this is a butcher who is like in the meat thing, and he's considered as the lower caste, but he has deeper knowledge than that Brahmana. So that shows up many times. Anyways, yeah.
Okay, so that's